Today, let's explore the whole issue of scope of work when a client buys Aeroseal. What exactly is the homeowner buying? From the perspective of us selling Aeroseal in the home, and from Aeroseal's perspective at headquarters, we might think the client is buying Aeroseal. But from the homeowner's perspective, that's not exactly what they're buying. As we'll explain in the next section, we may think we are selling Aeroseal. They think they are buying an outcome. What I mean by that is that in the very broadest sense, they're usually buying either a solution to a problem or prevention of a problem. They aren't buying what Aeroseal is, they're buying what it will do for them. Getting their duct sealed is simply a means to an end. So as far as how this impacts the scope of work, a fairly common mistake is that some dealers' Aeroseal technicians go out to the house thinking their job is just to inject Aeroseal. And so they close off the supply and return openings with foam blocks and somehow isolate the equipment, protect it from getting any sealant in it, usually with barriers in the supply and return plenums. Then they do their pre-seal test, inject the sealant until the graph flatlines or the computer tells them it's time to stop. They stop sealing and do the post-seal test. They print out the certificate, tear down the job, collect payment, and are on their way. You may be wondering, sounds reasonable. Why is this a bad thing? What's the mistake? Well, the client was sold that getting their ducts sealed would make their lives better. All kinds of third-party authorities like Energy Star say so. Improve comfort, save energy, deliver cleaner air, help the environment, and so on. So they bought duct sealing from us. But the Aeroseal process I just described is actually only a partial duct seal. Standard duct sealing best practices going back over 30 years and mandated by many authorities like code inspectors or utility rebate programs would also include sealing quite a few more duct leaks. Hold on, what other duct leaks, you may be wondering? The ones that the Aeroseal sealant couldn't get to. Think about it. Aeroseal only sealed the leaks that were between the blocks. There are three big categories of additional leaks that should be sealed as part of the work scope of a duct sealing project built around Aeroseal. The first is what's called boot leakage, the gap between the supply boots or return cans and the structure of the house. In the case of floor registers, it's the boot to plywood subfloor gap. There's always at least a small crack, and sometimes it's very large. In the case of sidewall and ceiling supply boots, it's the leakage between the boot and the sheetrock. Again, sometimes it's quite small, but sometimes you can stick your fingers through it into the attic. This gap is duct leakage. Air either leaks in or out of these leaks at a higher rate when the system circulating fan is on. Air also leaks through them at a lower rate when the fan is off. Boot leakage contributes to some degree to all the problems the client thinks they're buying a solution to. Poor delivered airflow, discomfort, energy waste, dust and dust trails staining the diffusers or ceilings, sweating, rusting, or moldy ceiling diffusers, musty odors, bugs or even rodents getting into the home, excess summer humidity, and winter dryness. In order to deliver on the outcomes the homeowner thought they were buying and that we promised, that the authorities say they will get by sealing their ducts, and for the Aeroseal dealer to deliver on the Aeroseal brand promise, boot leakage needs to be sealed. Boot leakage in sidewalls and ceilings should always be sealed. It is also absolutely mandatory to seal around floor boots when over a nasty vented, unconditioned crawl space. Although it is a bit more debatable, we also recommend sealing floor boots when over a conditioned basement or if a gap opens into a floor cavity, since it will ensure the most conditioned air gets to where it is intended, and there is likely some dust and health benefits. So, good standard operating procedure, the scope of work as it were, for an Aeroseal-based duct sealing job is to also seal the boot to sheetrock or plywood gap before reinstalling the registers or diffusers. Most dealers use caulking for small gaps and mastic foil tape or even expanding foam for big gaps. Sometimes we need to bang a nail or two in to put a floor boot back into place first. By the way, the good news is there's now alternatives to foam blocks that will seal over 90% of boot leaks automatically. We touched on this in our last session, and that is to instead use gasketed plates that are either screwed in place in the case of ceilings and walls, or weighted in place in the case of floor registers. This approach allows the Aeroseal sealant to automatically seal typical boot leaks during the seal. Some hand sealing is sometimes still needed if the gaps are really large. Expect to see some new Aeroseal products for register blocking in the future that make automatically sealing boot leakage easier. The second category of duct leakage that some dealers unfortunately overlook is all the gaps, holes, and connections at the HVAC equipment. The Aeroseal sealant can't get to these because we installed temporary barriers to keep the sealant from fouling the AC coils and heat exchangers. But they are very critical duct leaks to seal. These are the duct gaps and cracks under the highest pressure, precisely because they are right at that big fan that creates the duct pressure. The major leaks are the joints where all the big components come together, like the furnace to an external AC coil and the coil to the supply plenum. There's also leaks within the components themselves. From an IAQ and dust standpoint, a very critical return leak to seal is any external filter rack and the gap between the filter rack or cabinet and the air handler. This leak allows dust to bypass the filter, foul the equipment, and get into the house. Another common big return leak is all the seams inside of the blower compartment. There's a very high suction here. In this example, you can see that there's actually no bottom to the air handler at all. This seam needs to be caulked or painted with mastic all around. So good practice is to always hand seal all these equipment leaks as part of the project, typically using conventional duct sealing materials like silicone caulk, mastic foil tape, fiber reinforced mastic, and so on. And finally, our third category of leaks that many dealers seem to overlook can be a very big one. I guess it falls into the category of the hole so big you can't see it. What I'm referring to here are air handler and furnace closets where there is no return ductwork at all. There is no return duct, but the entire closet is the return duct, and they can leak, sometimes really badly. In the case of upflow air handlers in all-electric homes, the unit is sometimes sitting up on a stand, and the return air gets sucked into the closet through a louvered door or pass-through grills. We see these a lot in the Sun Belt in all-electric homes and in apartments and condos all over the country. The other very common example of this is mobile homes or manufactured homes that often have a counterflow air handler or furnace. Good standard duct sealing practice is to ensure all the leaks in these closets are sealed, and the only way air can get into the closet is through the louvered door or the pass-through grill. The most common are the cracks and seams in the drywall and holes for the thermostat wires and refrigerant lines. You just got to look. Dealers who pay attention to these leaks as part of their scope of work typically hand seal them. In theory, it would be possible to somehow plate off the louvered door and inlet grills and inject the entire closet with sealant, but I don't know if anyone's ever done that. So, those are the three categories of leaks that may need extra attention since they can be outside of the protective blocking: boot leakage, equipment leakage, and return closet leakage. There's actually a fourth category of really big leaks that some dealers miss. Aeroseal is pretty much limited to sealing gaps up to about 5/8 of an inch. It can sometimes seal bigger ones, but there is a limit. On many jobs, there are going to be some leaks Aeroseal can't bridge. In my own home, we discovered sealant blasting out of an almost 1-inch wide gap at the base of a wall stack, and so we used foil tape on it while the sealant was being injected. If we hadn't done that, it probably would never have gotten sealed. The very worst, though, are partial or total duct disconnects and missing wood or end cap blocking when building cavities were used as returns. So good practice is for the crew to try to find and then hand seal any big gaps and holes, and to mechanically reconnect any duct disconnects. Sometimes the crew will find a section of duct that even needs replacing because of animal damage. Whether or not the client is asked to pay an extra charge varies by company and what issues are discovered by the crew. As a general rule, we recommend having enough margin in your standard pricing formulas that the crew can do the occasional small extra repair without needing to get an extra charge authorized. However, if major surgery turns out to be needed, normally a change order must be authorized by the customer. These hand sealing repairs can be done either before sealing or during sealing. When the graph flatlines, a good crew doesn't just pack up and leave. It's time to go hunting. So, what we are selling is not really Aeroseal. It's a duct sealing repair project that uses Aeroseal to do most of the sealing and hand sealing where it is needed. The last scope of work point I'd like to make is that most dealers offer more than just Aeroseal and hand sealing when a client has leaky ducts. As we discussed, at a minimum, the very common option or recommendation is to also get their ducts cleaned. Another, especially for HVAC contractors, is to evaluate the system static pressures duct sizing, airflows, and offer or even insist on additional repairs to resolve or prevent low airflow, high static pressure issues. A great duct system is airtight and also has the airflow right. So adding or enlarging returns, a bigger return drop, installing lower resistance air filters, cleaning the air conditioning coil and blower, adding another supply run are all examples of common complementary repairs or upgrades that will ensure the client's desired outcomes are met. They aren't always absolutely necessary, but they're almost always helpful. And finally, of course, there's an almost limitless number of other indoor air quality, comfort, and energy-saving accessories or improvements which can be offered and included in the scope of work, depending on each dealer's business model. I mentioned duct cleaning and duct modifications simply because they are closest to the core repair promises of Aeroseal. So that's all we'll cover today. On the next lesson, we'll explore some of the most common misconceptions dealers can have about Aeroseal. I'll see you then.